you all know in a way of Tom Steinberg, and I'm going to leave it to him to speak. I'm not going to eat into his time, so quarter of an hour to go.
Thank you. Which of those times up there for a government IT question, which of those times is the time now, and which one is an arbitrary time to confuse the users?
When he started talking.
Yeah.
And that's the current.
Thank you very much. A usability failure in this room. So my name is Tom Steinberg. I'm the director of mySociety. mySociety is a charity that runs a lot of the better-known democracy websites in the UK, and our goal is to build websites that give people simple but extremely tangible benefits in the civic and the democratic parts of their lives, and whilst doing so, to teach the public and the voluntary sector things they need to know about how they can also give members of the public very simple, tangible benefits using technology. There's been a lot of talk about sticking plasters versus better, more strategic solutions today. We are very definitely the sticking plaster, especially on Parliament here, where we run both They Work For You, which is the kind of usable version of Hansard, what goes on in Parliament, and also Write to Them, which is a website that tells people who their politicians are and lets them write to them. I am going to show you two things today. One you might know, one is a world exclusive. Thank you. And then I'm going to say some things which I think are part of that second mission, the lessons. Before I start, I'm actually going to say that the position I'm coming from is somebody who disagreed with nearly everything I heard in the first half of the previous session. So I hope at least that makes it sparky. So this is Fix My Street. Fix My Street fixes people's streets. I hope it's reasonably obvious on the homepage. If it's not reasonably obvious, we have to go and change it. Please go and tell us. That's how we work. You put in a postcode. It shows you a map of your area, you stick a pin where there is a known problem, and the problem gets reported to the council. You don't have to know which council you're in, it just gets sent. The problem becomes public as well, so it becomes part of the local public debate about what's going on in areas. So there's various things to say about this kind of almost ludicrously simple little site. The first is that the public sector ought to aspire to generate public value from private desires of citizens. In this case, the desire is to get my street fixed. And yet what is generated is a public good, that is knowledge about what is going on in areas, what is going on with problems, whether they're being fixed, which other people in areas care enough about those areas to report problems, and so on. It tells you to be obsessed about usability, and to iterate rapidly when you build things. This site has changed so many times it would be meaningless to say that it is version 2.0. It's so many versions down the road, couldn't even begin to count. But it's also a good demonstration of how, of those rare examples where I think some government departments in the UK are doing things really right. This is paid for by government. It was paid for by what was then the Department of Constitutional Affairs, now Ministry of Justice, as part of a general call for proposals. The projects were given a maximum of £10,000 each. They funded several. They didn't expect them all to succeed. And there were very low criteria for entry. There was no form of kind of complicated bidding. And they got this, and this covers the whole of the UK. It's had more than 10,000 problems reported since the middle of last year, has picked up various awards, and even had councillors say that they're very happy because it stops the opposition members in the council from taking credit for the problems that they've reported. But there's actually another lesson from this, which is one of the points in which I am of a very different mindset from what I heard this morning. This is part of a mentality that says, if you can do anything, avoid culture change, avoid getting buy-in, avoid talking to anyone about your desire to reform anything at all. Just go and do it, and then when it's successful enough, change will happen after you. Now that may seem ludicrously unstrategic for somebody whose CV, as mine does, says strategy unit on it. But we found, starting with the volunteers who built factualmp.com, that one of the best ways to get rapid benefits out to the public and to force cultural change is to say, what technology is already there, and how do we build a much, much better front end that is all about the public and not at all about the government on it. This system works not by integrating seamlessly with 400 different customer relationships management systems in different councils, but by mailing each of the councils as if you might mail them as if you were a normal user. It tries to help the councils. It actually gives them massively more information about the nature of problems than they would get from a normal user. And many of the councils like it a lot, but it was done without their consent. It was done very rapidly, and it's there. There's another lesson about today, which is from this, which is that big doesn't mean big. We actually didn't even get all of the £10,000 for this. This is about £6,500 of work you can see in front of you. But it covers the whole of the UK. It's a national project with a single brand and a popular user base. Stop building big projects. That may seem a weird thing to say because you say, well, we have to have big projects. The world has big problems. But the success of the internet, which solves all sorts of huge problems, is, to quote a very famous phrase, based on the principle of small pieces loosely joined. Build excellent small pieces, make sure each piece works excellently, and then you will find that they turn almost organically into big systems. Don't build big systems. Stop it. Stop now. Right. Now for the exclusive. So another good example of a government department doing something, because this is supposed to be positive, not just an enormous rap on the knuckles session. The Department for Transport had a very visionary chief scientist a couple of years ago who said, we believe we have masses of information that we gather for one purpose but is probably useful for a lot of other purposes, but we don't know quite what or how. Would you please tell us? Would you come up with some? And they funded us to do some work, which we've just produced the second part of. And this is part of what you will see if you go online pretty much tonight. Sorry, the projector is at a different resolution. What you have here is a map of London. Now, often when people move to a place in London, they don't really understand the transport systems, but they know they've got a job somewhere, and they want to know where they can live, but they don't really understand where they can live that might be, say, half an hour away or 40 minutes away or whatever. So imagine you work at the Department of Transport. Imagine you were that lucky. But let's say you wanted to work only you wanted to live only 45 minutes away. Well, you would take this here slider and you'd push it down to 45 minutes. And these are all the places that mean you can leave your house at 8:15 in the morning or earlier and get to work by 9 a.m. In time for your day, making the transport system work. Ironically. And you can see it's not very symmetrical. You can live actually quite a long way away and still get there in 45 minutes, or you can live really quite close and the transport links are really bad. But that's not really any good because obviously you can't afford to live in all these places, especially since you're a poor, beaten upon and much maligned public servant working in IT. So we can then cut out all the areas that you can't afford to live in. Basically, anywhere down to 300,000. What do we think? Probably down to you ending up living in this tiny part of Deptford. There we are. Why show this other than the fact that it's sort of it's pretty, and in some ways it matters that it's pretty? Well, here is an example of a whole bunch of different public sector information data sets which were not created for this reason, being reused for something that is not just pretty. This is of immense practical value in my view, because this can help people choose better places to live so they have less painful commutes, so that as a block the public uses public transport more wisely, more efficiently, could even reduce house price pressures as people understand that they can live in less likely places and still get to work when they need to. It's based on all sorts of things like Transport for London's Journey Planner, the Ordnance Surveys database for postcodes. The background is interestingly OpenStreetMap collected by users with GPS, not government data. But again, to go back to kind of the problems of the orthodoxy we heard a lot about this morning, if you were to go along and say, can we please have the raw data set, the transport data here, you'd find that you have an excellent government contract of the kind which is often held up, namely the Transport for London's information systems with the Oyster card system, the timetabling and so on. It's a classic, really good government IT project. The problem with it is that it was only signed to do one thing. So you come along and you have a totally different use for this information, and guess what? You've got to renegotiate the whole contract. I hope that we can make such a strong visual impression with this that we can encourage departments to go and kind of make that kind of high-level shake-up. Classic really good contracts delivered with systems architects and really good project planning with really good specs. The one thing they don't do is they don't adapt for when somebody comes along and wants to do something totally different. So hence the reason why I'm going to keep talking about the inevitable victory of agile development methodologies in this field. Last thing I'm going to talk about for the lessons examples is continue to stick the knife in relation to classic project management is what's going on in Parliament at the moment. As I've said before, we run the accessible version of the Hansard system, which was built by volunteers like Tom here before it became part of our organisation. And this system is really widely used in Whitehall, as well as elsewhere, for people just to understand what the hell goes on here. We've been lobbying for several months to make one tiny change to the way that bills are published. Bills, pretty much the most important thing Parliament does because they become law. They are published in a bad way at the moment, which is good on paper, good if you're a lawyer, terrible if you are a citizen, terrible if you use the internet. We cannot get anywhere on this, and the main reason we cannot get anywhere is because it's in project management. It's in the plan, it will get delivered in the orthodox fashion when hell freezes over. Project management at that point becomes, of that classic big Prince 2 sort of kind, becomes the enemy, not just an enemy. So we will also be starting a campaign based on trying to put public pressure on the Parliamentary IT authorities to change this in the near future if you want to take part. So, those are project-specific lessons. I want to end with 3 or 4 really kind of general ideas and lessons. The first is that good security engineering, good project engineering is not incompatible with agile development. It does not require flowcharts. It does not require anything of that sort. It requires excellent programmers whose first priority with any project is do not lose your users' data, where that is the #1 goal of every project, whatever is actually written on the spec document. If you interview people and their first question is not about users' privacy, get different people. The usability trumps training, trumps culture change. You shouldn't actually spend 80% on culture change. You should take the 20% you spend on technology and double your investment on the usefulness of tools. We saw, 6 million signatures on the number 10 petition site in the last month in the last year, with no training at all. Most widely used tools any of us use using technology every day came without training. They came because they were valuable, usable tools. Just look at the mobile phones in 105% of the British public's hands. If they are worth using, they add value to people's lives, and they are usable enough, they will get used. Stop spending money on training, start spending money on more usable technology. One practical proposal. We've heard a bit about bringing more skills into government and into the public sector. I have one really specific proposal here, which is actually below the grade 3 level that was mentioned before. I believe each department should have its own little crack team of extremely good programmers. Only 3 or 4, not a lot. Whenever anyone asks for any project or specs out a project using IT that costs more than £1 million, it must be given statutorily to this team of people. If they can build it in 3 weeks, it doesn't get beyond the speccing phase. It just gets built and delivered. It doesn't get put out for tender, it just gets delivered. There are obviously certain projects out there that would have been better if they had been tiny projects built by a handful of people. And even if it only shaves off 10 or 15% of all the big projects, you will save literally billions. So the last kind of the philosophical point here is that the sticking plaster of agile, short-term responsiveness, the sort of thing that meant that the petition site that we built for number 10 changed 14 times in the first 24 hours. That is not the sticking plaster. That is the transformation. We're here to talk about transformation. That is the transformation in this field. That is the one that counts. And we got several questions asked about why have we been here for 30 years? Some people almost reveling in the fact they've been here so long doing this. There's a stench of failure over the traditional project planning approach. And I'm afraid that it deserves to fail, and a new approach that is rapid, fast, iterative, and driven by the public deserves to succeed. Thank you.